You are now listening to the Hot Take Podcast, brought to you by Full Time Fantasy. Here are your hosts, Stephen Taroni and Josh Daly. Time to make it hot.
This is the Hot Take Podcast, and I am back in the driver's seat, guys. With you, as always, is Stephen Taroni, and I am joined by Josh Daly. Josh, how does it feel to be in the passenger seat over there?
Yeah, a little different than last week, but last week was a little different the week before, and at this point, our listeners don't really know what to expect. With confidence, I can say that this week can be a little quarterback talk, and I think we brought someone in that's very qualified to sit down and talk with us here.
Yeah, that's right. We're going back into our positional rankings. Of course, you tuned in for the tight ends episode with Derek Brown, D-Bro himself. And last year, of course, we had Mr. JJ Zachariason on for our QBs, and we have him back on for our top 10. What's going on, JJ?
Not too much. We're sitting here drafting our Scott Fishbowl teams and just hoping and praying and crossing our fingers that we actually get to utilize those teams and that the NFL season happens.
Yes, sir. And of course, the Scott Fishbowl, the biggest pro-am fantasy football tournament out there. Very exciting to just be a part of that and have the opportunity to give back to people in need, specifically for fantasy cares and toys for tots. And if you want to donate, you can go over to paypal.com and then SFB Podathon, donate through there, or just go to fantasycares.net. It's really a good cause. And then at the end of the year in December, they have a shop-a-thon for kids in need. They go through a store and they're able to get, a bunch of toys for Christmas, and it's really cool. And I was just thinking about this, Josh, it's just awesome what Scott Fish has done, just to bring everyone together around this time of year and then give us the opportunity to give back.
Yeah, everything about it is fun. I know a lot of people get annoyed with it blowing up their timeline, but I shouldn't say a lot of people. There's like a select few, but right. I like everything about it, man. Like I like, it's a slow draft, first of all. So it has like a slow invite process, which I find pretty amusing. And also, just the entire kind of game within the game of like people, coming up with these, in some cases, like our buddy Mick, just YOLO strategies where like Mick, for example, triple tight end to start off, and Mick's saying he's either really dumb or he's going to look like a genius. But I think that's half the fun of it, man. And of course, like you said, it is all for a good cause. We made an appearance on the Scott Fish Podathon. Shout out to Salito and Kevin and Steve and those guys. But, they raised just from the Podathon donations, I believe over $35,000. So pretty fantastic. And, they've kind of have a select couple of charities that they're working for. But, Scott himself will tell you, if you are an advocate or a strong believer in a certain cause, you don't have to go far to find one. Just go ahead and donate whatever you can to, whichever charity you want to. So it's, if you're looking for ideas, hey, who's your favorite NFL player? The My Cause, My Cleats campaign. You can kind of see a list of them online. You can even just kind of Google search it or Twitter search it, and all kinds of good causes. And definitely want to encourage others out there to donate as well.
JJ, we were talking off air, and you're at the 102 in Scott Fishbowl. How many years have you been in the Scott Fishbowl tournament?
Oh man, I think this is probably 6 or 7. I've been doing it for a while now. The last like 3 or 4 years though that I've done it, I've just been completely mediocre. Like no terrible teams, but no good teams. So hopefully things turn around this year. I feel good about the draft so far. Typically in these drafts where things are so unpredictable and positions are being, all 4 positions are being drafted at a high rate. You have no idea what position is going to be drafted next. You really have to read the room, and that's how you really extract value. In the last couple of years, I've walked away from the draft and I've made some mistakes, like very obvious mistakes. But this draft, I feel like, I've been at the start of some runs rather than the end of them. And so far, so good.
So what division are you in? And what was your, you were at the 102. any strategies going in, and then what has happened in the draft that has maybe made you kind of adapt to it?
Yeah. So, going in, I knew, I still take some of the ideas that and stuff that I've researched in regular leagues, regular redraft leagues. And I use those same sort of high level ideas for drafts like this. So for instance, I've done studies on finding league winners at running back and wide receiver, for instance. And what I found was if you want a top 10 running back or a top 8 wide receiver, which is what I deemed as league winning players, just given some historical data. I know it seems arbitrary when I'm just reading it off like this. But if you really want a top 10 running back or a top 8 wide receiver, you have to spend to get those players. But the running back position is the one that you can get a little bit later compared to wide receivers. And so a lot of people are saying, wide receivers deep and it's easy to get wide receivers late. That's not entirely false, but at the same time, if you want a true difference maker, it's a lot easier to find that later at the running back position than the wide receiver position. So I'm sort of taking that idea and just using the scoring with this, obviously adjusting my rankings that way and adjusting my, the types of players that I would be drafting based on the scoring. But I'm taking that general idea and using it within this draft. For instance, RB2s historically have been really bad bets. The RB like 15 to 25 to 30 range. Yeah. So I'm just sort of avoiding those players in this draft. That's generally what I've done. So I anchored the running back position with Saquon Barkley and Kenyon Drake, and I've really just ignored the position. I'm now in the end of round 10, or about to have my 10th round pick, and I haven't gotten another running back yet. I had some values with Chris Godwin falling to me at 411, and then I drafted DJ Moore in the next round, but then the draft ended up being pretty wide receiver heavy after I picked DJ Moore. So I was lucky to walk into Josh Allen and Jared Goff. Josh Allen, not someone that I was really targeting in this thing, but, the upside certainly there. So, I think so far so good. Things have really worked out into how I sort of wanted it to.
I love that you talk about, the wide receivers being deep every year, and people, have that sort of mindset that, hey, look, you can wait on wide receiver, and now the big thing is you're a wide receiver for this tournament. And I think for 2020 in general, but to grab a top tier running back is so important. So to grab one at least, and then if you want to target the wide receivers, I think I'm all for that. But at the same time, yeah, I agree. And then Josh, you can speak to this real quick. The running back is deep. You're talking about guys like Marlon Mack and Damian Williams, who we've talked about on the show before. They're going pretty late. Ronald Jones, another guy who could be, walking into, he's going to get maybe 200 carries in a Tom Brady offense. So it's like these guys are available late.
Yeah, 8th, 9th round for these guys in my current draft that I'm in, and we might get a live pick here, man. I just kind of slid to the on deck spot after a few more QBs and tight ends off the board, but yeah, I agree. Lot of good non-quarterback value kind of sliding down the draft, especially in my division. I'm in the Radio Flyer Red Wagon division, and just for an example. 6 at the 601, I'm a little higher on Gardner Minshew than most, and I think I'm like the second highest player. So that's definitely some evidence of that statement. But only one person drafted him higher than that. But for me, it was almost out of necessity. He was the QB 20 taken for me to start the 6th round. So that's one of the things that's kind of caused some of these values to slide down the board. But I'm kind of with you guys. Like, I was not planning on taking a wide receiver super early, and yet at the turn, I started off with the Saints stack of Thomas and Brees. So then I wouldn't say I panic drafted running back. I love the guys that I got in CEH, David Johnson and Mark Ingram. But then having to kind of I don't know if I'd call it a reach on Minshew, but that's earlier than most are taking him. But happy to still land, DK and Hollywood at the 7-8 turn.
Yeah, I love the way your team turned out. Even though like I'm not a big Minshew guy, and 601 to me seems high. And then obviously you were the second highest. But you had to do what you had to do in that draft with the QBs flying off the board. My division, the starting line division, QBs haven't really been flying off the board like that. There was a wide receiver run actually in the second round. So I've just been I just hammered the running back position. Leonard Fournette fell to me at 410. So kind of like Godwin for you, JJ. I was like, all right, well, yeah. I mean, you can't just keep letting him slip. I'll take that value. And then Le'Veon Bell at 503, which I love that in the 5th round for him. So, I just hammered the running back position, which is so different than I ever play. So it's very interesting. But it's another thing that this tournament does is it's like it makes you do things that you're not used to doing. Like Josh, like you were saying, like you don't have much of DK Metcalf, but that value you couldn't ignore. And then all of a sudden, if you pair him with a Michael Thomas, and DK Metcalf really hits along with Hollywood Brown, like what if Hollywood Brown hits too? Like that's just, that's the kind of upside you want in a tournament like this.
Yeah. And for me, I think we mentioned this when we had Ryan McDowell on last week, but my personal strategy was that the first 5-6 rounds, I was going to give myself a little bit of leeway, and that ended up being the 601 at Minshew, where I knew I was going to have to maybe get a little uncomfortable with one of those picks. But for me, it was all about the safety. And after that, yeah, I'm going upside. That's why I went Hollywood and DK. But being kind of forced into the Minshew pick, I guess, quote unquote forced. I know we're not planning on talking about this, but I'd like to get a real quick take from JJ on Minshew, because from when I went back and looked at the Jaguars games, really the only game that he didn't do that well in was the London game. And I don't know if that was maybe a few too many mustache rides or what going on the night before, but that was the only game where he didn't really look like he was comfortable. Every other game he looked super comfortable, but so I mean, I did it. I pulled the trigger. I had to take him. I'm just hoping he can kind of show that same poise. And if he has 2 bad games all year, hey, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Minshew's fine. I don't mind him as sort of a later round. Obviously this is different because it's a super flex league, but a later round dart, with upside. Because the thing with Gardner Minshew that, we know, and I'm sure a lot of people listening know, but some people don't, is that he has that rushing floor too. He provided a lot of fantasy points, and at least if you get 20 to 30 yards a game on the ground, you're essentially removing an interception and one of those mistakes. So I don't mind Minshew. No, I mean, he's just one of those later round guys. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of, the quarterback position is deep. But if you can get him at a discount, then I don't mind it at all.
Yeah, 344 rushing yards. So that was actually one of the higher numbers. Let me see. I think that is 4th at the QB position last year.
And that's only in 12 games started and 14 games played. So, I mean, it's on a per game level, he's really did a lot more with his legs than I think people realize. And a lot of that had to do, obviously, too, with negative game scripts and scrambling. Yep. But we should expect that this year with Jacksonville. They're not a good team.
Yeah, that's really the only, if he can kind of stay as consistent as he was last year, I figure he could take a small step forward as a realistic expectation. And then if he can just, I know people hate to extrapolate, but I mean, that's a pretty easy projection when you're looking at he played about 75% of a season. If we can add that other 25% on, approaching 500 rushing yards is definitely realistic as well. So you guys are making me feel a lot better about this.
Well, yeah, and and he was 5th, by the way, in rushing yards at the quarterback position. So yeah, I really love that floor there. And then
top 5, baby.
And then yeah, like JJ said, Jaguars not a good team. And then you have DJ Shark, D.D. Westbrook, Chris Conley. These all might not be household names, but that's a good trio of wide receivers, along with Fournette and now Chris Thompson out of the backfield. And Chris Thompson, might be just but he is one of the better pass catchers at the running back position. So at least you have that. I mean, I definitely like Minshew as your QB2 to go along with that team. The way you constructed that team is great, no matter what like ADP you got Minshew at. So let's go from like an average quarterback to a really good one. Let's get into our top 10. And of course, my one is the $500 million man. It's Patrick Mahomes. Does anybody have Lamar Jackson at 1?
I do, but it's very, very close. I mean, my projections came out. I don't rank based on projections by any means, but I definitely use them as sort of like a baseline to get a good idea of where ceilings are and where floors are for certain players. And Lamar Jackson came out like 4 points ahead of Mahomes. So it's one of those situations where I could go either way. They're in the same tier. I'm likely avoiding both in redraft, but yeah, I mean, I can't fault you for putting Mahomes there.
Yeah, for me, it's like regression with both guys. I feel like positive regression for Mahomes in the touchdown department, and then negative regression for Jackson. It's just Jackson. What if he gets you 800 rushing yards? I mean, come on, like what is his floor of the rushing? So like Jackson can't be lower than your third quarterback, in my opinion. Josh, where are you at with number one?
I still have Patrick Mahomes. Looking at what he did last year with the injury and everything, and seeing Jackson lead the league in touchdown passes, raise your hand if you put a prop bet down on that.
Right.
But that was, feat within itself. Same with you. You mentioned the possibility for regression in both directions on both of these guys. And I won't spend a ton of time here telling you guys why I think Patrick Mahomes is good because one thing I do want to say, though, that I thought was really cool yesterday, I don't know if it was Warren Sharp or someone tweeted it out. There was a 2017 preseason highlight reel of Patrick Mahomes, and he's absolutely ridiculous. A few weeks worth of workouts and leading into his first couple preseason games, it's just insane. Like these across the body pinpoint accurate throws. For me, that's why I have him number one. Is just his arm talent is so far superior to almost anyone I've ever seen. I mean, I just don't remember seeing someone that can not only launch deep balls with ease, but just pinpoint accuracy and the level of ridiculousness on his throws. He's also mobile as well. So it's hands down. It's Mahomes for me. I shouldn't say hands down because I have Lamar a close second, but these guys are both fantasy studs, and there's probably no need to waste any more time talking about it.
Yeah, I just want to say that, with Mahomes, what I really view him as like the Aaron Rodgers, just like amplified. I mean, that's what he did. It's kind of like what Kobe did, talking about anybody who listens to me or has followed my stuff and knows I'm a big basketball guy. Kobe kind of emulated Jordan's game and took it to another level. He took that range out like 30 feet, and that's kind of what Mahomes has done. Like every throw that you've ever seen Aaron Rodgers make, just all the throws, and then running to his left, back shoulder, all that, Mahomes can do, but he just does it, a little bit better, a little bit further, with a little bit more heat on it. So that's just who he is. And that's why he's got that big contract, a huge contract. So I have Jackson at 2. And yeah, I just think that the touchdowns are going to come down, but that rushing floor, again, I think he's going to touch 800 yards at least. It's hard to project back-to-back 1,000 rushing yard seasons for Lamar Jackson, but it could certainly happen. I think that floor is 800, and then with that, he's just gonna be really consistent for you and really, really good. JJ, who is your third quarterback?
My QB3 is Dak.
Okay.
I think that you can go either way. I have sort of Dak and Kyler in their own tier here at 3-4. But we saw Dak last year, finish as that top three passer in points per game. They add CeeDee Lamb into the mix. I don't think Dallas is going to be as pass heavy as they were last year. It's going to be kind of hard for them to. Yeah. But even still, he's obviously got the rushing floor, but he now has that passing ceiling as well. I love the addition of CeeDee Lamb to play there in the slot for them. He has all the weapons in the world. It's just hard to not love Dak this year. Obviously when you factor in price, you might not be drafting him necessarily, but I've got him at QB3.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Career high in average depth of target, ADOT 9.3, which is actually pretty good. And I think I'll bring that up again when I'm talking about some of these quarterbacks. And it was also his first 30 touchdown season. So you like that. He had like 3 years straight, I think, of 6 rushing touchdowns. That came down this year. He's going to give you that nice floor with the rushing touchdowns, either 3 to 6 in that range. So that's pretty good to factor in. Touchdowns are always hard to project, but I think you can kind of put that floor at 3 touchdowns for him. Who is your third quarterback, Josh?
Yeah, I also have Dak. He's been locked in as my quarterback 3 since right around the middle of last season. Honestly, he still has the rushing upside, like you mentioned. Someone put together a highlight of all of Dak's rushing touchdowns, and they almost all follow like the same pattern. He's just kind of like taking what the defense gives him, which is kind of like a steady theme with Dak. But you got to love the multitude of targets there. They add a guy, if you replace Cobb with CeeDee Lamb, and shout out to the dad runner community, you replace Jason Witten with an ascending Blake Jarwin. He's got a nice stable there of guys, and like JJ said, he might not throw it as much, but he's been improving steadily every year, especially like in the touchdown department. But I feel like a very efficient season is ahead for Dak.
Did you use the word stable on purpose? I feel like that was good, like with Gallup and Lamb. I don't know. Does that make sense? Is there something there?
Little unintended pun, but I'm glad you picked that out of there.
Yeah, I got you, man. I have Dak. I had him at 3, and then I redid my list, as I told you before we went on air here, and I actually put Russ and Kyler ahead of him. So I have Russ at 3, and because I just keep thinking about, if DK really, improves, which I think he's going to, and then you have Tyler Lockett there. What Russell Wilson has done for 3 straight seasons is 30 plus touchdowns and an ADOT of over 9 yards. And so 30 touchdowns, 3 of the last 4 seasons. He's just so damn efficient, so consistently. And it's just, for me, I've traditionally ranked Russell Wilson really low. I'm just done doing it because I just like, the pass attempts aren't there. The volume's not there. They're a run first team. You know what? They might pass more this year than they've passed in a long time. And if they do that, what's going to happen, if he just continues to be efficient. So, Russell Wilson is kind of like a dark horse QB1, the way I look at him. I really think his value could be that high. And then at number 4, I have Kyler. I love that rushing floor. I think that he gives you a 500-yard rushing floor, 20 touchdowns last season. He wasn't very good, in the passing department, like as far as just like end of year stats. And on a per game basis, I think you were unhappy with Kyler a lot of times, but you add DeAndre Hopkins, you add a full season of Kenyon Drake, second year in the league. And again, that rushing floor I think is so safe. So Kyler Murray for me, again, another dark horse candidate for QB1 overall, just because of the offense he's in and the talent he really has.
Yeah, I have Russ at number 4. Put him just ahead of Watson and Murray because he does, have a couple of good supporting receivers there, and gets also Greg Olsen now. So instead of having to kind of turn these no-name tight ends since Jimmy Graham that are into these fantasy viable free agents, he now gets a guy in Greg Olsen that's not only going to bring like a veteran presence to the team. I think that he's going to be a nice option for Russ, and Russ is already crazy efficient. So it's going to be incredible. After all the, like you said, you're sick of ranking Russ too low. I'm sick of kind of writing off Tyler Lockett and expecting this, inefficiency. And I mean, at this point, if you take the track record of these guys and the upside of DK Metcalf, like we were just talking about, and then sprinkle in a little Greg Olsen and maybe some Antonio Brown rumors, I don't know what AB does to this team. He could be a cancer, or he could be that catapult that kind of gets them over the hump again. But it's definitely an option where I have Russ ranked just ahead of the other 2 guys. For me, this 4, 5, 6 range is really tough for me, but I have Russ just a shade ahead of my next 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, and then with Russ and Kyler, just the similarities are there across the board for what Kyler could be, with this type of quarterback. JJ, who do you have at number 4?
Yeah, at number 4, I have Kyler. I can talk about Russ here too after you guys talked him up a little bit. I don't disagree. I've Russ at 5. I just the difference I think is that, and last year I was lower than consensus on Russ too. But at the same time, I don't think the process was necessarily wrong. When you look at the way that he scored points last year, a lot of it was based on him blowing up in games at the start of last season. But when that team sort of didn't have those insane negative game scripts, Russ wasn't really doing what he was doing, the first 6 or so games of the year. The final 10 games, he only had 3 performances where he ranked higher than QB 14. And of course, so what I'm basically saying is I agree that he has the QB1 ceiling, if Schottenheimer decides to open things up a little bit in that offense. My fear is that the floor is actually a little bit worse than what we might get out of a Kyler or a Dak, given the rushing ability of both guys, given the weapons that Dak has, and then the confidence that we have in the passing attacks for those teams as opposed to Russ. There are still question marks around Brian Schottenheimer-led offenses, right? And with Kyler Murray, too, the other thing, to your point about him not having a strong passing season, he only had a 3.7% touchdown rate. That touchdown rate was like under 2% for a large portion of the year last year until basically the second half. So if Kyler really turns that around, and he should, especially given DeAndre Hopkins is there, if he can turn that around, he has QB1 upside as well. So I like the floor a little bit more with Kyler. I like the situation a little bit more with Kyler, but of course I can't fault anyone for putting Russell Wilson there.
Oh, and just think of what happens when David Njoku is traded there.
Yeah, right.
No, but yeah, Kyler, like you have to look at that. And I think a lot of people would say, that 3.7, oh man, well, yeah, I'm not drafting him, or I'm, why is he ranked that high? Well, you have to just assume that improves. That's a very low number, that TD ratio there. So yeah, these guys are all lumped in the same kind of tier, I would say. And then Deshaun Watson, who we haven't mentioned yet, he's at my number 6. Do you guys have him at 5?
Sorry, I have Deshaun at 6. I have Russ at 5.
Okay, and then where are you at, Josh?
I got Murray at 5 and Watson at 6, and it's just because of the exchange of goods at the skill positions that these two teams foolishly and / brilliantly pulled off this offseason. If you're going to take Nuke from one and give David Johnson back, but you have Kenyon Drake to back him up, I just feel like as a whole, you can expect the Cardinals offense, like JJ already alluded to some of the touchdown efficiency numbers, and you can just expect that to kind of improve as a whole across the board in general. And I do expect the offense for the Texans to kind of take a step back from where they were last year, just because you're replacing a Nuke with the oft injured Will Fuller and Randall Cobb. So just kind of the complementary pieces were what were the tiebreaker for me. But yeah, I mean, this 4, 5, 6 range it's just knotted up. I think the real discussion starts to be after that 6th QB is, where you'll see some variance in a lot of rankings.
I agree completely. And JJ, you can talk about Deshaun Watson real quick, but is this offense, because like for me, the way I'm picturing this offense, especially you lose Hopkins, when I think about it, I think of it as almost underwhelming. But then you just look closer, it's like Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb comes in. That's not somebody that's like very sexy that we're thinking about. But then you bring in David Johnson, who we know is a good pass catching running back. Like, we might be sleeping on this Texans offense. I mean, how are you looking at this offense, JJ?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that it's easy to compare. And I mean, this is why I think Deshaun Watson should be ranked where we have him ranked here at 6, because you look at every other quarterback ahead of him and they, the only guy who doesn't have better weapons is Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson's doing crazy, crazy things with his legs. So with Deshaun Watson, though, I mean, he's going to have the rushing floor. I mean, Watson's going to, if he's healthy, he's walking into a top 10 season because of what he can do running with the football. But I'm actually kind of intrigued by all the moves that they've made because we could see an increase in ADOT. He has two pass catching backs now with Duke Johnson and David Johnson. I don't mind the personnel. If we were to take a step back and not compare and contrast it with and without DeAndre Hopkins, we'd probably say that his weapons were average, across the league. It's not like he has these horrible weapons. They were better with DeAndre Hopkins, but yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that some people are discounting him just way too much based on the loss of DeAndre Hopkins, which we should discount him in some way, but I think that people are overstating that a bit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and the variance and outcomes with these quarterbacks, I mean, at the end of the year, a lot of them are going to be lumped in around the same statistically, around 4,000 yards, 24 to 27 touchdowns. So, again, Deshaun could really finish as, the QB2. That is in his range of outcomes. QB1, it's in his range of outcomes. So, and I think that this offense is kind of slept on right now. So I think it's just something to bring to light. So going to number 7, I actually have Drew Brees. And that's probably higher than I've ever ranked Drew Brees, and or in a long time anyway. but he just had such a good start last season. I mean, he has, these target monsters in Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, some of the best pass catchers at their positions. And then Jared Cook, you bring in Emmanuel Sanders, just with this scheme, it seems just effortless that Drew Brees is going to give you 30 touchdowns if he plays a full 16. So I have him at 7.
Nice. JJ, who's your number 7?
I have Josh Allen at 7. And it's really just based on the fact that when I get to that point in drafts, I'm not really taking Josh Allen for the record based on his ADP. But when I get to that point in drafts, if Josh Allen, let's say, falls to like the 9th or 10th round or something like that, because you're in a draft or even the 11th or whatever, because you're in a draft where people aren't drafting quarterbacks early. At that point, I'm looking really for upside and looking for guys who, have the rushing floor, which he certainly has. We've seen him score. He's essentially their goal line back as well. But you have to ask the questions of what if he does take a step forward with his arm and he does progress as a player with Stephon Diggs there. And we might say that's unlikely because Josh Allen hasn't shown that much. He's been a really inaccurate deep ball passer, even though he has this big arm. But if you can still look at his situation and say he has a decent ceiling, I mean, it's no different than the way that people viewed Lamar Jackson last year. Obviously the floor is a lot different from a rushing standpoint. But a lot of people were questioning what Lamar Jackson could do with his arm. What happens if Josh Allen takes a step forward and progresses? I'm not saying that he's going to do what Lamar Jackson did last year. I'm not a big fan of Josh Allen, the quarterback. I'm much more of a fan of him as a fantasy quarterback. But I think that in his range of outcomes is a higher end QB1 season, and that's why I have him ranked at 7.
I'm all over the place when it comes to Allen. I don't know, man. Like I had him at, I think 7 or 8 at one point, and then I redid my rankings and I brought him all the way down to 16. It's just so there's no consistency there. I think I need help with Josh Allen. I know I'm not drafting him in a lot of places. I think his ADP is a little too high. I think he's one of the he's not one of the first quarterbacks taken, but he's almost in that second tier of quarterbacks taken in drafts. So it kind of just makes me, I'll just wait on Matthew Stafford or someone like that. That's just kind of how I feel about him. Josh, who was your 7th quarterback?
Believe it or not, a guy that I do quarterback rankings every year, and no matter how I spin it, this guy always ends up at number 7 in my rankings, and it's Matt Ryan. And I mean, just looking at where he is, the volume that this passing offense is going to have, we know they're going to chuck it. They have a couple of stud targets there in, Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. And, one might be kind of descending, one might be ascending. But nevertheless, they're both studs. They replace their, Pro Bowl tight end with Hayden Hurst, who is, first-round pedigree, who, in my opinion, has a fantastic case to be a breakout this season. And unfortunately missed out on him in Scott Fishbowl. But just looking at what's been done, a typical Matt Ryan season is 27 touchdowns and 12 picks. And you're going to get about between 42 and 4,300 yards. So for me, that's something that's been so consistent and reliable that I feel like I can put him at number 7 with confidence. And, maybe he finishes as a top 10 and not quite to that 7 spot, but a couple top 2 finishes in the last 4 seasons. The ceiling is definitely there for Matt Ryan. So I'm higher on him than most, but I do love me some Matt Ryan this year.
Yeah, if you think Calvin Ridley is going to hit this year, I think that you need to be high on Matt Ryan. So that just kind of goes hand in hand, depending on how you feel about Calvin Ridley, I guess.
Yeah, and I do. So, that would make sense.
Right. And then you bring in Todd Gurley, who can be, or has been a proven pass catcher in this league. And then, of course, like you mentioned, Hayden Hurst. So, sure, yeah, I see the ceiling there for Matt Ryan, who isn't on my list. But I think that's just part of my perennial disrespect of Matt Ryan. So I actually have Tom Brady at 8, and I think I'm buying into the Buccaneers this year. I'm buying into 600 pass attempts. I know that, and Tom Brady threw 613 pass attempts last year, so I know he can do that. And Jameis Winston threw 626 last year for the Bucs. So I think he's just walking into that. That's the volume he's going to get. They're going to cater to Brady as far as, the middle of the field with Rob Gronkowski, with Godwin out of the slot, and then also OJ Howard, who people have just forgotten about altogether, who I think is going to be pretty valuable for Brady. Then, of course, Mike Evans. I mean, he just has a lot of weapons in the Bruce Arians offense. So I think he can still compete as long as they can protect him. And if he gets 600 pass attempts, then yeah, he's my 8th quarterback. And then JJ, who is your 8?
I have Tom Brady at 8 also. I basically have like a massive cluster of quarterbacks here in terms of tiering. But the way that I really view the traditional pocket passers, the guys who aren't giving you points with what they can do with their legs. Obviously I rank Josh Allen at QB7, a guy who the first 2 years of his career has gotten 500 plus rushing yards, and that's usually a sign of being a top 5 or 6 fantasy quarterback year in and year out. But once you kind of remove that and you don't have that anymore with these players, and this is the first year I can remember where the quarterback market feels very, very efficient because of that, because everyone's ranking those quarterbacks high, whereas, in previous years we've been able to exploit that a bit. So what you're looking at with these traditional pocket passers is, you're really buying into who can have somewhat of an outlier season in terms of touchdown rate. And guys who, so basically I'm going to look at guys who are talented, but guys who also have really strong red zone weapons and guys that they can throw to in the red zone, which is why to me Tom Brady makes sense. Would it shock anyone if Tom Brady walks away from this season with 35 touchdowns? It would be a high end range of outcome for him. Right. But it's still a very plausible and possible thing given the weapons that he's throwing to. And that's really, really what you need for a lot of these guys to pay off, is that sort of outlier. We see it all the time. We saw it with Matt Ryan the year that he was the MVP. We saw it even last year when Drew Brees came back from his injury, and he was the QB2 and QB3 behind Ryan Tannehill technically, but he was essentially top 3 quarterback. Was Lamar Jackson, a huge gap, and then sort of Brees and Tannehill down the second half of the season. But Brees had a 7.1% touchdown rate last year, which was well above his career average. His yards per touchdown pass was a lot lower than what he's seen traditionally. And so that's something that generally regresses a bit. And that's a reason why, sure, Brees can hit that again and he can get to that point. But, you need that kind of performance from these traditional pocket passers. And I'm going to buy then into the weapons that these guys have around them as a result of that. So that's why I have Tom Brady ranked 8.
Yeah, I love it. I think that people are buying into that quarterback for sure, especially in the Scott Fish Bowl where Drew Brees is going in the second round and Tom Brady is going in like the 3rd or 4th. So people are really buying into the older pocket passer quarterback, where in, years past, like 2 years ago, that wouldn't be the case. Josh, who's your 8th quarterback?
Yeah, real quick. I completely agree with that. That's why I went with Brees. The scoring format with the QB efficiency seems to be kind of, the big deal. We can hopefully we have time to get into that maybe for some late QB targets in this format. And speaking of that, take a break from the rankings. I have some breaking Scott Fish Bowl news. I did come up on the clock, and Steve, I've been texting. I did at the 9:10 turn. I was able to snag Jonnu. So I got my first tight end. He was the tight end 15 taken in this division. And with the 10:01, I went back to the stable and got our boy Michael Gallup. So that's a quick update to the roster.
You elected to add to the stable over Debo. So you went Gallup over Debo. Yeah,
I did. I like just the foot injuries scare me. I know we talked about it a little bit on the tight ends episode with Debro. I still haven't changed the way I feel about that. And so I'm just going to go with I feel like he's, got some tremendous upside and potential on top of that. So not only is he safe, I do think he's got a little bit more home run upside just because all the times we've seen Dak slightly overthrow Gallup. I think we're going to connect on a few more of these this year. I already mentioned, I think Dak's going to be a little more efficient. And getting back to the quarterback rankings talk here, number 8, I had Josh Allen. And then after Josh Allen, like JJ was saying, there's just this humongous cluster of quarterbacks and a couple guys that I think kind of have, I don't know, tied at my number 9, if you want to say that, instead of 9 and 10, is Carson Wentz and Matt Stafford. I mean, both of these guys have shown ability to carry their teams as recently as last season. If they wouldn't have gone down with injuries, Eagles fans know all about the injuries from last year. So that's kind of the root of the issues there on why I feel like Wentz is getting the short end of the stick. And of course, Matt Stafford going down with the back injury here halfway through the season. But some encouraging things coming out as far as both of the quarterbacks concerned, not only from the Philly camp, but Stephania Bell also saying that she's not worried about Matt Stafford's back at all coming into 2020, which is great. He was on his way to another 5,000-yard season. And, like I said, the MVP chatter, both these guys were getting it before they went down last year. So definitely something to be said with a healthy complement of receivers. Of course, Philly adding just a ton of field stretchers. Who knows if after this week's Deshaun Jackson comments, if he'll be on the field. But this team actually has legitimate depth at the receiver, so they don't have to play guys like Fred Ward or actually, I think Fred Ward is the guy from like Road Trip and Tremors that I'm thinking of a different. Greg Ward. Yeah, Greg Ward. Yeah, sorry. You can IMDb Fred Ward, and you guys will know. You guys will be like, oh yeah, I've seen 1,000 movies with him. Shout out to Fred Ward if you're listening.
Wait, was he in Naked Gun 33rd and a Third? Was he in that one?
Oh, dude, he's been in like. Okay. I'm not joking. Like probably 300 movies that you and I would know for sure. Okay. Low key parts, but definitely I'm sure is living comfortably. But
good to know.
Anyway,
he wasn't a Naked Gun movie. He was.
Yeah. Sorry, I steered us off the rails. But yeah, shout out to Fred Ward for real. But no, after like the Wentz, Stafford, those guys kind of round out my top 10.
JJ, what are your thoughts on Matthew Stafford going into this year? Did he make your top 10?
He didn't make my top 10, but he's still part of this like giant cluster, of guys. I have my final couple are Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan, but you can put Drew Brees in there. You can put Aaron Rodgers in there if you wanted to. You can put Stafford in there. The reason, the thing with Stafford that I really liked from last year is that Darrell Bevell comes into town and Stafford throws it deep, 15 plus air yards at his highest rate of his career by far. And we saw that translate then to the stat sheet. I do think there's going to be some regression there. But at the same time, he at least showed that ceiling. And I think he's, again, one of those pocket passers that you would want to target because of the weapons that are around him. He has some of the better weapons in the league. So I can't fault anyone for whether it's Stafford, whether it's Matt Ryan, whether it's Tom Brady, Drew Brees, any of those guys towards the bottom half of the QB1 rankings. Can't fault for having those guys there at all.
What are your thoughts on Wentz? Do you see like a big ceiling for him, or do you think that he's going to be like a lower end QB1?
I think that he's just a safe option. We've seen some rushing juice from him as well, which isn't bad. But yeah, I mean, I think he's more of a safe option. I do think that if something goes down with the Djax drama that's happening right now, and rightfully so, the drama is happening. If something does happen to Deshaun Jackson, that would likely change the way that I view Carson Wentz, because Deshaun Jackson makes an entire offense a lot more efficient. We've seen that at every stop of his career. So I think that would easily make Carson Wentz more of a high-end QB2, and then allow guys like Stafford or whoever to jump in there and be ranked ahead of him.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys share my struggle with these QB rankings, because I have Stafford and Wentz at 11 and 12. I wanted to put them in my top 10. I love both. And then Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, they're not even in my top 12, which is some people might say that's ridiculous, but I think we're all kind of in agreement. Rodgers and Matt Ryan could both be, 9 or 10, depending on the finish. And then at the end of the year, statistically, it's just going to be around the same, pretty close. But I have Daniel Jones at 9, and, I just like Daniel Jones' upside a lot. In 12 games, he had 279 rushing yards. So, kind of like Gardner Minshew, there's a sneaky rushing up floor with him. And then you give him Saquon Barkley. If you can give him over 100 targets again, which we saw in Saquon's rookie year, that's just also adds to the floor of Daniel Jones. and then those 24 TDs in 12 starts. So, you like to see that. I really like the core of receivers he has. I've talked about it a lot on the show. And, I also don't think the Giants defense is going to be very good. So again, a lot of passing. The Giants were 8th in pass attempts per game. I'm big on Daniel Jones. I think putting him at 9 is just kind of just making sure I know to draft him, because I think that can be where he ends up. And I know that he's not going to be, drafted as such, obviously. And then I have Joe Burrow. I have Joe Burrow at 10. So 2 guys that I just think that, they could easily be on anyone's rankings at 16 or 17, 18, whatever. But for me, I just think that the upside is there for Burrow. Again, a guy who I think is going to throw for 600 pass attempts. Cincinnati was 6th in pass attempts per game last year. So Andy Dalton actually threw the ball a lot. And then he went down, and I guess it was Ryan Finley passed the ball a lot, whatever. They all passed the ball a lot in Cincinnati because the defense is atrocious. Even so, Joe Mixon still didn't get the targets he should have gotten, which is just really depressing when you look at how much they actually passed the ball and how little they passed the ball to Joe Mixon. But with, again, the offense, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, T. Higgins, that's just a lot of weapons for Joe Burrow, who's coming off of championship season. Just a lot of swagger behind that. So I think, the offense is already catered towards him. So it's just a really good fit. JJ, I would love to get your thoughts on Joe Burrow real quick.
Yeah, I love Burrow. He's one of my, later after this QB1 range, the guys that we're talking about today. He's one of those players. I think him and Tannehill both have the rushing upside. Right. And we've seen the efficiency and the upside with Tannehill, obviously. But with Burrow, he has sneaky athleticism. He actually had really good rushing numbers in college. It wouldn't shock me if we see 300-ish rushing yards from him, which is going to give him that nice, Gardner Minshew type floor. But then obviously the ceiling is just crazy, just given the weapons that are there and his potential in the league. So I like Burrow a lot as a late round quarterback. And, if you're in a redraft league where a quarterback is fairly replaceable, he's not a bad target because that if he doesn't pan out, that's not the biggest deal in the world.
You're in the 11th round in a single QB league and you haven't drafted a quarterback yet. Who would you get, Daniel Jones or Joe Burrow?
I'm still going Daniel Jones, just because, we saw a lot of rushing upside with him last year too. And he's obviously not a rookie either. We don't necessarily see rookie quarterbacks, especially guys who aren't necessarily, the super athlete, the Cam Newtons or Kyler Murrays of the world, end up panning out at a really high rate. At least Daniel Jones has the year under his belt. Pretty good weapons there. And then we, like I said, we saw last season, he had 3 30-plus point games. We saw the ceiling with Jones. So I'd rather shoot for that upside.
Yeah. And then just to reiterate, man, Giants have so many weapons with Golden Tate, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, all very good receivers. And then you get Evan Ingram, who's an elite tight end at, when he's healthy, obviously, and then Saquon Barkley. So it's just a lot to work with a really bad defense. So it's just a nice equation for fantasy points. Let's talk about one quarterback that didn't make our list that, we would draft late and feel okay about. Josh, I'll start it off with you.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about 12. Hey, if we have time to go over 12 quarterbacks, I mean, we basically did because we talked about the same 12 quarterbacks. One guy we didn't talk about that has been getting a lot of discussion. We talked about it briefly last week is Cam Newton. I mentioned on our episode last week that I'm not scared to draft him. Super tempted to put him, right there at 10 in my rankings, but I have him still just QB 13. He might sneak up into that, 12 range, something like that, 11, 12. But, I got him just outside right now, but he's, just without rehashing last week's episode, I mean, everywhere he's been, he hasn't had a big complementer of weapons. And right. If there's any team that I think can customize an offense around a player, it's the Patriots. So I definitely like his potential, or I shouldn't say potential, but his opportunity going forward this week. I wanted to see him go to New England pretty much since Brady signed with Tampa. So this I think it's a great fit. I think it's going to work out great. And, like I said, March, he's probably just going to get an MVP or not MVP, but a Pro Bowl season under his belt. And, Patriots just pay him peanuts, and somebody will give him $30 million a year starting next year. So we'll act like we're not surprised, I guess.
Oh, and just think what happens when David Njoku is traded to the Patriots. I already did that. Sorry. JJ, one late round QB that it didn't make your list, but you would feel good about drafting as your QB1.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. I like the Cam Newton call. I actually have Newton ranked at QB 12, I think, right now, just because, again, when I'm looking late in drafts, I'm strictly looking at upside. My projections have Cam coming out as like QB 18. But that's also a conservative projection because it's not giving him, the 95 to 97% of the team snaps. It's more like 90%. And the rushing upside, isn't baked into that as strongly as it could, as what we could see come to fruition. So I like Cam, and Cam in week 1 gets Miami, I believe. So, he could be a decent streamer there too. So if you're going into the season with that late round quarterback sort of approach and idea that you're going to stream in a worst case scenario, Cam's not a bad guy to target. My fear with Cam, though, is that once we start to see football being played in some way and we get more and more reports, his ADP is just going to rise. So he might not be as late as we would want. I still, I like Joe Burrow, who we talked about. I like also, the idea of regression is definitely there for the Titans offense, but Ryan Tannehill is still kind of intriguing to me. I say this, I think, on like every show that I talk about quarterbacks, but like 3 or 4 years ago, based on what Ryan Tannehill did last year, he would have been like a QB6 this year in rankings. 3 or 4 years ago, the way the fantasy community would just basically take what happened the previous year and make it into their rankings the next year. Right. But there's some obvious regression that's coming, but I'm just surprised that people have taken it to such an extreme where he's, the QB 20, sometimes 22 in drafts, when the second half of last year, of course he played out of his mind. But he was a QB2 in fantasy football the second half of last year. So he has that upside. He has that potential, decent weapons there too, has the rushing upside. I still think Tannehill, even though regression is hitting, is still a decent value right now.
Yeah, no 1 year is like the other. If you look at like just 2018 and the quarterbacks, I mean, statistically, they were, so many 30 touchdown seasons, and then it just wasn't the case last year. A lot had to do with injuries. We saw just a lot of injuries. Of course, Tannehill, Daniel Jones, a lot of these guys came in late into the season or later into the season than week 1 anyway. So yeah, no, Tannehill, just a guy who's being slept on, you can get for free, which is really nice. And I love that Cam Newton playing Miami week 1. I mean, if you're drafting a quarterback late, you have to go in with the approach of you might be streaming that position. So, week 1 is obviously a must hit. And that's why I'm just going to mention Jimmy Garoppolo. And, I can hear the groans. I can actually hear the groans when I say that name because no one likes Jimmy Garoppolo in the fantasy community. But I mean, he did have 27 touchdowns last season. Like, he was pretty efficient actually for an offense that doesn't pass a lot. But he gets Arizona week 1 at home. I mean, what more do you want from a guy you can just draft at the end of your draft and play Arizona? I mean, that's just a great streaming option. Well, then he has the Jets in week 2, the Giants week 3, the Eagles week 4, and then Miami in week 5. So you're getting 5 weeks. You can start him. I just think that Garoppolo is a great value. And then, of course, you have George Kittle. You have all these playmakers, out there for him. So I'm just behind that for a guy. I'm probably going to draft him as my QB2 in Scott Fishbowl. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that.
I like that. I like that a lot, man. Speaking of Scott Fishbowl, JJ, I had one real quick question since we got a couple minutes left here. Yeah. So like last year, we just talked about Tannehill. He was a guy that was kind of like a savior in a league this deep. Being that it is super flex and a lot of people want to get like that third QB on their team, getting into when you're starting to get into the second half of the draft here, I'm just curious, since I'm at the turn, I might kind of play it safe and go with like a Tyrod and a Justin Herbert situation. Like, I personally feel like Justin Herbert could be the next Josh Allen or Daniel Jones. I mean, he kind of fits the bill to me to kind of take those next steps. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on the Chargers quarterback situation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a terrible spot, first off, for a quarterback. Generally speaking, too, we always overestimate how long the existing quarterback is going to be starter when a team takes or especially an early first round pick. A good example of that is Daniel Jones, but in this case, it's one where Tyrod likely won't be the starter as long as people think. I do think that there's a little bit of funkiness to it just because of the way that the season's kind of playing out right now, and the lack of reps, etc. But generally speaking, we see these guys jump in under center a lot sooner than later. So I actually, I don't mind Tyrod in a format where you can easily replace the position. But I think Herbert's probably the better, like, longer play in like a super flex format, just because you're going to likely get him, towards the end of the year when you're going to need that production as opposed to the front half of the year. And I just don't think that we're going to see Tyrod, just based on history, we're going to see a guy like Tyrod be the starting quarterback for that long. Of course, it can go any way, especially this year, just given the unpredictability of things. But I'd rather just sort of anchor the back half of my season and in the playoffs as opposed to the front half.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I know a lot of people, including myself, were able to do that down the stretch with Drew Lock and just kind of keeping him stashed. So hopefully something like that can play out, and one of us or all of us are dancing at the end of the Scott Fish Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, just 2 years ago, it happened to Tyrod. We saw it happen where Baker came in and, like, Tyrod wasn't playing terrible, So what happens when he does, start off maybe 0-3? They're going to go to Justin Herbert. JJ Zachariason of Numberfire, the Late Round Pod. Just tell everyone where they can find your stuff, man. What's going on at Numberfire right now?
Yeah, so all my written stuff is over on Numberfire, and then I have my podcast, the Late Round Podcast, that I do a couple times a week.
Fantastic. Yeah, Josh, anything before we get out of here, buddy?
No, just happy to be in the middle of Scott Fish Bowl season here. I know some of these teams are drafting a little slower than others. Just a little PSA, just be a little patient, be kind. Not everybody is just sitting by the computer ready to fire off a pick or two. That's why they have an 8-hour timer. So just be nice.
Yeah, be kind to these people. Yeah, everyone's trying. We're all in this together. Have fun out there on Twitter. Check out all the rosters going on in the Scott Fish Bowl. Of course, donate PayPal, SFB Podathon, and fantasycares.net. And then, of course, go over to playerprofiler.com. Check out the world-famous draft kit. You can see some of my work over there. On behalf of JJ Zachariason and Josh Daly, my name is Steven Tironi. Thanks for listening. This has been the Hot Take Podcast.